The 2020 Iowa caucus ended a few days ago, and quite simply, it was a disaster. What happened here and why was it so bad? Let's find out. First off, if you're not aware, the results were expected to come in the same night. Caucuses started at 7 and they were expecting a few hours maybe they'd have results and everything would be good. But that didn't happen. The results didn't come in for almost an entire day, almost 24 hours. The reason for this? Mainly because the app they chose to use for the caucus was really not prepared for it. You see, generally how this caucus goes is you have a precinct chair who is in charge of one precinct. They will count up and tabulate all the votes in their precinct. They will report that to the Iowa Democratic Party, who will count all of the precincts around Iowa and then give the results. But the app that they chose to use was not ready for it and it just didn't work. The Iowa Democratic Party said the app is to blame because there were coding issues in the app. One other thing I do want to point out is this app is not freely available to download on the App Store. You have to get an invite to download it directly. And there was no training about this app. The precinct chairs did not receive any training. They were just told by the Iowa Democratic Party to figure it out on their own and basically experiment with it so they had an idea of how it worked. And obviously, that did not work. That was a horrible idea. And you think maybe they would be ready that perhaps this app wouldn't work. I guess they didn't learn the lesson from Pokemon Go when it was first released and basically would never work. As a backup, you would think that maybe, just maybe, they would have people, I don't know, waiting to take phone calls. You don't have to use a smartphone as an app. You can just call. That's a thing that people do, right? Yet they didn't think it was necessary, so they did not have nearly enough people. And they were so backed up that some precinct chairs reported waiting up to 2 hours to finally hand over their information. I don't know about you, but this sounds like a very horribly run caucus. To make matters even worse, just in case you're a conspiracy theorist, the creators of the app are tied to the Clinton campaign. So there were some people who were trying to claim that the establishment Democrats, such as the Clintons, were trying to suppress the caucus because they were afraid that Bernie Sanders, who is not an establishment, would win. I don't think it's really valid, but I think it's funny that it was brought up. The results are now more or less known. We still don't have all of the precincts, but we do have 70% of them. As of the time of this recording, Pete Buttigieg is in first place with almost 27% of the vote, and Bernie Sanders is in second with 25%. Now, I'm not an expert here, but what I gather from looking at this is that even though we don't have all of the votes, it's pretty safe to assume that Pete Buttigieg has in fact won. Now, it's not a dramatic victory, and he's only a few percentage points above Bernie at the most, but it is still a win for him, which might give him a boost because nationally, he's not polling very well. What surprised me about this is one, that Biden is all the way down at 15%, but also that Amy Klobuchar got to almost 13%. She's just behind Biden in this caucus. Now, in the middle of all this chaos and turmoil, on Monday night when they had no idea who had won, that didn't stop a lot of the candidates from going up there and basically giving a "we won" speech. Now, most of them kind of veiled it as saying we did a good job, we don't know the results, but it's still going well. But Pete Buttigieg, even though he did say we don't know the results, there was one thing he said that really doesn't go along with we don't yet know the results. And this was it. Quote, "Tonight, an improbable hope became an undeniable reality." An undeniable reality. So is he trying to claim that the undeniable reality was that he was winning? Because I don't see how that's the case because we didn't know. There were no official results. Now, there were two responses to this speech that I want to highlight here because Pete Buttigieg did win, and so I think it's okay to take a little bit of time to make fun of him. First, some people were fairly quick to point out that Pete, who has very, very low African American support, had a very high percentage of African Americans in this picture, and they were basically claiming it's a photo op. They are essentially implying that someone from the Buttigieg campaign decided to directly put African Americans right there because it was right behind Buttigieg. And so when he would give his speech, it would look like he had more black support than he actually does. Speculation, we don't know the truth. I don't necessarily think that's what happened, though it is possible. Also, in response to this speech, hashtag mayorcheat began to trend on Twitter. And as far as Twitter trends go, I think that one's actually pretty clever because he's going around calling himself Mayor Pete. That's what people call him to try and make him seem more personable rather than calling him Mayor Buttigieg. It's Mayor Pete. And they just changed that to Mayor Cheat because they thought that he was cheating, that he was claiming victory when we really had no idea. Now, at this point, he has won for the most part, but that doesn't change the fact that there was a fair amount of pushback against him on Monday night. Now, this is all over and done with. We basically know that Pete has won. So what's the problem here? What's the issue? Well, first off, as a lot of people pointed out, this does not bode well for the Democrats as a whole. You have people like Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren. Basically, all of them are claiming that we need to nationalize things such as healthcare and give the government more power and more control because they're capable and they know what they're doing. And yet they weren't even capable enough of having an Iowa Democratic caucus go off smoothly without these issues. So a lot of people are bringing up the fact that if they can't handle a caucus, why do we think they can handle our healthcare? There's also the fact that the winner of the Iowa caucus generally gets a fairly large bump going into the other caucuses and the primaries. The issue here is there is so much going on in this caucus, it doesn't seem likely Pete's going to get the boost that he normally would have. So because it took so long, and because there was so much negativity surrounding the entire thing, it doesn't seem likely that this caucus will benefit Mayor Cheat nearly as much as it would have if none of this had happened. Even though he won, it could have been a much, much bigger win if the Democrats had actually been careful in what they were doing. The next caucus in New Hampshire happens February 11th, so we will see if this has had any impact on that. And hopefully by then, the Democrats can get their act together and actually know what they're doing. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.